Behold, iPods. So obviously these are all the minis. These two are the first gen, and these three are the later models. Pretty sure they're all 4 gigs. Looks like someone might have taken care of this one. It's got these sheets on the click wheel on the screen. But obviously they got tired of them, and I bought most of them in Japan for like 300 yen for this one. This one, 500 yen, big spender there. No sticker. Yeah, 500 yen again. So they're mostly in pretty decent shape, but they've got, you know, a couple hits here and there, some scuffs. This one's took a hit at the top there, kind of bowed the top out a little bit. I'll probably see if I can bend that back into shape, but you know, mostly I'm doing these because A, I have new batteries, and B, I was going to flash mod them. Well, at least one of them. I've got proper CF cards for these, which were kind of expensive. But the largest one I could find was 64 gigs. Apparently, according to other iPod enthusiasts, you can get these up to a terabyte or more. Whereas some of the other classic iPods can only handle, you know, a couple hundred gigs maybe. So, not that that's a huge deal. I think the entirety of my digital music library is somewhere around the 50 gig mark. And a lot of that's like remixes or extended mixes or, you know, whatever. And then that's not to say I want to listen to every song I've got on the go. So I'd probably pare that down to, you know, 30 or 40 gigs. And I have an iPod Nano that's only 8 gigs, and yeah, I basically just took a hatchet to my entire library. It took a long time to curate it down to the 8 gig. It's not even 8 gigs, it's like 7.2 or something. So, and that's not even huge, like FLACs or anything. It's 160K MP3s, which is basically what I use across the board with most of these, because that's about the bitrate that sounds, you know, good enough for portable use. And also you can fit a lot of songs on these when they're, you know, about 3 megs, 4 megs per song. So I think we're going to do the green one. Like I said, these are Gen 2s, or Gen 1s. These are Gen 2s. I've only got these. I don't have any of the pink ones, or I think they did purple and something else. I mean, I do have a purple shuffle. I also have a blue shuffle that's about this color. But I'm also going to put a battery in. But, yeah, I don't have those batteries yet, so that'll have to wait. So I think these are a slightly different shade. This one is slightly lighter than this one is. I don't know what the deal is. I don't remember which one of these I was going to try to beef up for my own purposes. Thought about gifting one of them to someone, but a lot of people just don't care about this sort of thing anymore. So it's a lot of effort to waste on something nobody's going to care about. Whoopsie. Well, if it wasn't broke before, it is now. Yeah, so here's a dent on the back of that one. And this one's pretty good. So, yeah, let's do the green one there. I think I've already had this one apart to try to get the top up. Hold on. So this shouldn't be a big deal. They make tools for this. I'm using a straight razor. It'll be fine. or safety razor rather. And I think you got to take the bottom off too. Yeah, this has a weird circlip deal on it, doesn't it? Alright, so I do have circlip pliers somewhere, but one side. Be more careful over here because of that cable. Alright, I got it. So, and then there's the thing, you gotta pop that out. Ideally, you'd want a plastic spudger for this, but you know, just don't go too crazy on it and you'll be fine. Come on now. Let's just kind of cockeyed a little bit. There we go. This is a lot more robust than the one on the Nano, let me tell you. couple little screws. Apparently these are Phillips double zeros. Phillips screws are a lot like A-cell batteries, or any batteries really, where an A cell would be bigger than a double A cell, which is bigger than a triple A cell. So Phillips, you know, 0 is pretty small, so double 0 is smaller and triple 0 is smaller than that. Nobody makes A cells anymore, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so this might just... Yeah. Ta-da! I've already flash modded this one. 32 gigs, which is pretty good. Like I said, I've got some 64s. But mostly we're in it for the battery this time around. So should just pull off some sticky. This is definitely the original. It's made by Sanyo. And unlike a lot of the later cells, these don't have as much of a tendency to puff up. So yeah, 32 gig flash card there. And these use Wolfson DACs, which apparently is kind of important for sound. There are mods for at least the classic versions of these that replace, it's probably these two capacitors here with more potent units to give better sound. So this should be an uprated battery pack. This one's, does it have a rating on it? No. I think these are originally 300s. This is a 3 or 750. These wires are a bit thicker. I cleaned it up a little bit. It's better than it was. It's still slightly bowed, but it should be alright. Should be fine. Alright, come here, you. I didn't tell you to turn on, robot. guess. Alright, got a firewire cable, which is also from Japan for 200 yen, which is a pretty good deal. Is that the top? That's the top. I don't think I actually have anything on here. Nope. So, about, yep. So this is why I don't bother to name these things. I get 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11 characters on a Windows format iPod. So it can even put the D on the end there. So yeah, I just don't bother to name them. And you have to think of a name that fits in 11 characters. So cool. Well, I guess I'll let this one charge. And check out this first gen. So this one's been hit a little bit over here, so it's also kind of slightly raised in parts. You see how that's slightly bent, this cable. That's why you need to be careful when you're taking that thing off. Like I said, they make circlip pliers, like actual pliers that are meant for that. That would make the job a lot easier, but if you're only going to do this once, it's not really worth buying. But if you or your friends or parents are into automotive maintenance, circlip pliers are often necessary for a lot of car stuff, so they might have a set. What's this? Alright, let's see. You are Hitachi. Now this drive may work, but I mean honestly, what's anyone want with a 4 gig hard drive anymore? So this is also Sanyo. So these are pretty easy. These just kind of come up a little bit. If you do have the plastic spudger, that's ideal, but if not, you can gently pry with your fingernails. You can't have like ridiculous, super feminine fingernails when you're doing this, because you're going to break them probably. Yeah, there's your board. There's your DAC again, little tiny thing there. Got Hynix DRAM. Got your controller chip. This lovely tape to take off. Now the big reason for keeping all of the tape and bumpers is mostly to keep your flash card from bouncing around in there. I do have one of these. So CF proper, I haven't seen anything larger than about 64 gigs. There might be a 128 out there somewhere, but it's going to be like a couple $100 probably. Real CF cards are much faster than SD, and consequently they're much more expensive. So historically that's always been the case. Nowadays it's less of a distinction, which is why a lot of high-end cameras will use SD instead of CF anymore. But CF historically has been a better choice, partially because CF has a native ATA interface in it. Right, it's part of the CF standard. Whereas an SD controller is going to need an ATA to SD adapter of some sort. Right, so it's an extra step in the process, which is additional parts and additional power, and is slightly slower than if you had a native interface. So this is native ATA, CF is native ATA. This has an ATA to SD adapter. So you got that extra step. Not that performance is going to be like blistering on these things anyway, but on other things like, well, if it wasn't broken, it is now. Probably not. These are actually pretty robust once they're not spinning. Anyway, in cameras and stuff, the speed of proper CF versus SD was noticeable, at least back in the day. Nowadays, it's not quite as big of a deal. And SD also had a lot more, or CF had a lot more wear leveling and performance management and all that baked into the card, whereas SD relies on the host controller to do that. And most of the time the host controller didn't do that to save weight and money and complexity and yada yada. So I could have been peeling the tape off of this while I was talking, but I didn't. Now the biggest proper CF hard drive I've seen is, I believe, 12 gigabytes, and that was a Seagate model. Otherwise, you're unlikely to see most of these above 4 or 6 gigs. I do have an 8 gig that I bought for a camera once, because back in the day, an 8 gig micro drive cost a lot less than an 8 gig CF card. And if you've got something like a Canon SLR from back in the day, you know, it was built for CF Type 2, which are these thick drives. And so it was a good deal. Apparently there were stories on the internet where people were buying discounted iPod minis just to get these drives out of them back in 2004, because they were selling them basically at a loss. So I don't know if Hitachi was trying to get Apple to sell them stuff or buy their stuff, or if Apple just really wanted to sell an iPod mini to people. this gently pulls out. Just gotta get your wiggle on. Ta-da. And there's your micro drive. So you can see how thick that is, just like this one. So these are type 2 cards. And hold on a sec. This is a type 1 card. You can see the difference in thickness. They're roughly 50% thicker, the type 2s are. So a number of machines won't support the type 2s, only the type 1s. So we're not actually going to install this 256 meg card, but yeah, so it's not keyed. So you got to remember how it goes in there. If you forget, then basically that bit goes down like that, and that side goes up, right? So it goes like that. So on a type 1, that basically means that, yeah, label side up. Or, see how it's kind of got that little pokey-uppy area there? That goes toward the bottom. So that would go in like that. So you just make sure you've got your pins lined up. And press it in evenly. This has pin 1 marked. Alright, we're back with these. So, changing it up a smidge. I managed to get this one so it's not quite so abused anymore. So that'll be fine. But, these showed up. Hooray! So this is an XDXC adapter. If you want to use something like this, there are 3 different types of SD card. There's classic SD, which gets you up to 2 gigs. There's SDHC, which gets you up to 32 gigs. And then there's SDXC, or yeah, I think that's XC. And that gets you above 32 gigs. There's no limit as of yet. You get up to 2 terabytes, I think, but I don't think they make 2 terabyte cards yet, so kind of irrelevant. So this one is just an HC, so if you wanted to use this card, you could only get 32 gigs in your iPod. It won't use anything more. So if you want to do a big pod, you're going to need an XC card. So we do, because we have this. Ta-da! 256 gigs. So this is not the fastest variant that you can get. This was like, I don't know, 23 bucks. Whereas the faster one was like twice that. So, I mean, the faster one would kind of make a difference in some models, such as this one. This is a 5.5. I'm probably going to mod this at some point, but this is, you know, you're going to need more speed on this because it does video and all the rest of it. Whereas these just do audio. And really, the cards don't need to be all that fast unless you plan to write all 256 gigs like every other week. I'm basically only going to do that like once. And then do onesie twosies here and there, so you're not really going to notice. But anyway, so we're going to do this green one, and we're going to pull it apart and switch out. So just pop that in. So I don't think we really have to format this. label side up, pointy side, angled side down, and then plug it in real nice and easy there. Should do. Alright, so there's our 32 green one, the Gen 2. So let's pop that back down on there. Nice and easy. That should do. Alright, so we're going to need to stick this on a computer when we're done here. Holy hell, I finally got it. This is the next day of trying to get this thing to work. So you may notice that that's only a 128. I decided to downgrade because apparently these things, depending on how much info you've got on your MP3s and whatnot, they've got a track limit of between 20 and 30,000 before you start having problems. So I figured 128 would probably be enough on one of these. I'm not using FLACs or video files or anything like that on a Mini. But we finally got it. It sucked. So it started off with Windows XP trying to use iTunes 7. Wouldn't update because it's too old. Okay, fine, whatever. Came out here to try to use Windows 10. Endless errors. It just will not format, like, at all. I'm not sure entirely if it's the SD card or Windows trying to force some of the exFAT formatting on there, and it's screwing stuff up. Because the iPod doesn't know what exFAT is. But if I put this on a Mac, like DankPods and the rest of those guys do, hey, guess what? Straight in, press restore, boom, problem, no problems, 0 problems, worked perfect. Even with the 256 meg card. Even after I restored it on the Mac, I came in here because I figured, hey, I just need to reformat it. As soon as I clicked restore, it completely broke again. So I'm gonna do a proper video about how to get this to function properly without downloading the weird Chinese software to do it. It's not quite as bad. It kind of sucks though. There might be a couple of different options, but basically what you had to do is take the flash card, like this here one, and put it in another computer running software and tell it to write a new MBR to it. This is after you press restore. You press restore, it gives you a bunch of errors, and then you take this and you put it in another computer, tell it to write an MBR, and then you put it back in here. The downside is if you press restore on this again, it's going to break. You're going to have to take this out. You might be able to do it without, you put it in disk mode and run the MBR writing scheme thing that way, but I haven't tried that. I might. But right now I'm going to try this out and make sure it functions. It's slow. It takes a minute. See, look, I'm gonna go back, and I'm gonna grab some LCD sound system. There's the shift button. There we go. Drag it over. Drop it, and we wait. And we continue waiting. So it hasn't even gone to the little spinny thing yet. So it definitely takes a minute. I'm not entirely sure what the deal is, or if that's normal. This is the first time I've done an iPod with more than 32 gigs. I've got a Gen 4 iPod Classic, and it's not quite this bad. So, but it's using a proper CF card, and it's only 32 gigs. This has all that SD nonsense, and it's 128 gigs. So, small difference. So, yeah, we're, still waiting. Still waiting. There it goes. So once it starts, it's not too bad. It's just the process of getting started takes a while. So I don't know what the deal is. I don't know. But after I test this out, I'll go put it back together. Well, we're back with these, and it has not gone well. So for some reason, it's really difficult to fit this thing back in its case. I mean, the flash card is no thicker. It's actually thinner than the factory hard drive, but it presses up slightly on the board here when it goes into the case, which causes it to rub against this lovely piece of metal. And when that happens, capacitors and things get snapped off. Yay! So let me get this thing to focus. Looks like maybe. Alright, so there are currently 4 devices missing on this board. There's 3 capacitors and a diode. Now, chip capacitors are pretty easy to source, no big deal. But diodes are another story. So I might have found one that's suitable, but the package for these, see, that's the diode. And yeah, it's extremely small. Sadly, I can't reuse it because it's only got one of its 2 leads left on the package, so it's pretty much cooked. But you can see this other Gen 2 capacitor, no capacitor, diode, no diode, capacitor, oops, come back here, no capacitor, capacitor, no capacitor. So maybe that explains part of the slowness, because I did try to put this thing together once and it didn't cooperate, so I took it back apart. But I'm going to see if I can fix these. The replacement I found is about the size of one of these diode packs, which is larger than the teeny tiny deal that it's supposed to be, which is this teeny tiny thing, but it shouldn't be any bigger, so it'll probably fit. Alright, it's super ugly, but it might be okay. We just need it to work after all. So I'm going to slap the accessories back on it and try to slip it in. I actually got this stupid thing back together. So none of the little bits got snapped off. I haven't tried the dock yet, but otherwise it powers up. It's got battery. It makes this little beep. And if I plug it in and press play, it makes sound. So I'm going to slap this thing back together. Lessons learned with the iPod minis. Basically, when you put it back together, you're going to want something to push the logic board away from the click wheel frame. So I don't know what the deal is. You can see the frame there. Some of the Instructables have it where you can actually remove the go to sleep. Where you can remove the click wheel without, taking out the logic board first. But so I tried to undo the click wheel and then put the logic board in and then put the click wheel back in, but it just doesn't fit because you still got to press the wheel down and that interferes with the logic board there. So I don't know how they got it to work, but obviously I nearly killed the stupid thing trying to put it back together. So alright, so I'm going to see if this thing charges on FireWire. It looks to be charging. It's not on fire. So I think it's okay. Yep, cool. I'm going to go see if it syncs. I guess it just takes absolutely forever to do the initial load. Let's go and eject. And the iPod has ejected. Seems to be fine. Let's make sure. Yeah, it's gone. So, cool. Well, I'm going to call this an OK because it works. Seems to. Yeah. So, should be fine. Alright, so yeah, I'm going to go ahead and put this one back together because it works, and it works good enough. So you want to make sure you put this on sticky side out, otherwise it won't stick too good. It's got these little recesses in the bottom there. You got to get it into. See the little recesses there. Put that in. Lock that in. There's one. And there's the other. Make sure they're all in their little spot. And you grab your little deal and should got 3 deals. The 2 deals go on the bottom and the 1 deal goes on the top there. So that should just snap in. In the top, make sure you line up your switch so it's in the not hold position. So we'll just put back on there. Still works. Alright, and that's a friggin' iPod mini. So let's put this one aside carefully. And let's look at the differences between a Gen 1 and a Gen 2. Here's a Gen 1. Here's a Gen 2. Right away you can definitely see some changes. So obviously this has a large thing right here where a chip might have gone, and maybe that was for development, maybe that was for a feature they left out. But there's that big section there versus this little tiny section in the same area. There's a larger display connector on the Gen 1 versus the Gen 2. So the screens are not interchangeable. So this one has a capacitor here. This one does not. It didn't break off this time. It just doesn't have one. And they may have moved a couple things around because this has these two capacitors here, whereas this does not. It just has 1, 2, whereas this has 1, 2, and then 3 and 4. So these inductors are still there. These diodes are still there. These other capacitors are still there, though this one's been switched. They've changed the orientation of the control chip. So there's pin 1 on that one, there's pin 1 on that one. So those aren't compatible at all. This chip's different from this chip. Clock crystal, whatever this does. This might be the FireWire chip. Right, on the other side, so the DAC is the same. That Philips chip, the big one, is the same. This one has an extra, the Gen 2 here has an extra Philips chip underneath the big one. They've rearranged the inductors. This one has them above one another. This one has them kind of left and right. They also changed the values. This is a 400, I think. This is a 100, whereas these are both 100s. So there's quite a lot of differences, actually. I didn't expect them to be that much, but there are. So if you got a Gen 1 and you need parts, you got to get another Gen 1 for parts, unless you just want to swap in a whole Gen 2 board. I mean, the connectors for the touchpad are the same and all that, so... So let's see if we can actually get this one back together without having trouble. I'm not going to put the battery back in. So this is the pretty light blue one. Yeah. So take the board. So one of the things we were getting hung up on the other one was, see that notch there? At the bottom of that notch is kind of like a ridge, and this was getting hung up. That one and the top one was kind of getting hung up there. So when you put these back in, the board goes underneath those two ridges. So, like that. And it slides in. And if you're putting it together for real, Make sure you clean the screen, otherwise all this junk is going to be there permanently. So, yeah, this one, it's hard to illustrate, but yeah, this one's getting hung up internally as well. Yeah, there we go. So you can see where the board is running into the frame for the click wheel, right? Those tiny chip capacitors and whatnot are running into it. So the only thing I found that works, which is going to be really difficult to film, is to get a thing, preferably like a long thin bit of plastic. A spudger might be too thick, but if you're gentle you can use something that's metal like this. You can kind of get it in there and wedge it just slightly underneath the dot connector, and then push the logic board in just a tiny bit, and it starts to slide in. You might have to do that for the whole length of the board, but yeah, there we go. Now we're basically, now we're in. So they never mention that in any of the Instructables. So this one might be the same. It doesn't even have a hard drive. Let's see if it's, well, I'd have to put the click wheel assembly back on. Actually, since they said you can do it, I'm curious if you can get the click wheel back in. See, the click wheel has to go up above these two little notches here, right? So you kind of got to wedge it in there and then press down on it, but yeah, that's, yeah, if I had the hard drive in there, there's no way I'd be able to compress that enough. See, I don't know what the Instructable iFixit thing was. It says you can get this out without, you know, removing the logic board, but I don't buy that. So let's try putting the click wheel back. So same deal. It's got to go in, put it in an angle, not like that. It's got to rest on those notches there. And then if you want to keep from scratching the click wheel up, you've got to press down on the center wheel while also pressing in. So kind of like that. And then resume on the other side, and there it is. And let's try to put the logic board back in. Again, the board goes under the little tabs there. It still wants to hang up on that. I don't know how these people are doing it. And there's not even a drive pushing up on the bottom of the board there. It's just that EMI sponge, and it still hangs up. So just press down, and there it is. Alright, well, I think I'm going to be about done with this particular video. It's already kind of rambling as it is, but you know, these are a little more difficult to work on than you might have been led to believe. but they're really not that hard if you can figure out the deal. And a lot of the aftermarket batteries don't always fit all that great. So like the one I used in the green Mini is a little tight. A little tighter than I'd like. But yeah, so if you wanted to just do a quick flash mod to this. This is a Gen 1. Gen 1s can do maybe 128, I think. The Gen 1s aren't as good as the Gen 2s apparently, but 128 is not an issue. But if you want to do 256 for some reason, you're going to want a Gen 2 because I don't think these would work with it. Anyway, so reassembly. This goes back on there. Line it up, and you got to press firmly down until it's seated. And then that kind of goes right there. Grab the battery, and it goes on the top. I'm actually not going to plug that in just yet, because if these little chips hit the bottom of that metal frame, they can short out. So upside down. Upside down. Make sure the logic board is above those little deals. That looks good. Battery. And it's hitting the stupid click wheel. Okay. So again, puts this in there. I really wish I had some light that would go in there properly, but it won't. Watch it fall over. So you take your deal, you can kind of see where it's hitting those little chip capacitors in there. So just push this in there, kind of get right at the edge of the 30 pin. And gently wedge that in there and push down on it, like lever it downwards, and then push from the top. Right before you go all the way, you're going to need to do the battery. And again, make sure your screen is clean before you do this, because if you don't get it and there's dust on it, it's going to be there forever. Alright, now we should just be able to gently push that back in, and then, right, so everything's all nice and in there. You push that, and there you go. Then you put the screws in the top. 1 screw, 2 screw, and you put your clippy deal in the bottom, and Bob's your uncle. I mean, you might want to test it before you go all the way, but that's basically how you get this stupid thing back together.